Have you ever had a conversation that shifted your perspective or helped you make a real change in your life or your career? Well, I can say that I've had many, and I continue to do so, because these are the conversations that help me grow. And that is the power of a meaningful conversation. This is why today I'm going to share with you a framework that I created to help you have more of these meaningful conversations, whether it's in your personal life, with colleagues, or even in difficult situations. This framework is called SHIFT, and it is more than just a coaching tool. It's a way to create positive impact through genuine, thoughtful communication. Hola lovely people, I'm Jose Ucar, in case you don't know me. I'm an international communication and influence expert and the author of Global Influence. As part of my introduction, I also like to share that I'm a Venezuelan immigrant loving life in London. I've coached and trained people from a wide range of industries, countries and backgrounds to communicate with impact and confidence. And I truly hope that today's video helps you become a more impactful communicator. As we navigate through conversations every day, one thing is clear. Communication that creates a shift, a change, is powerful, is impactful, is influential. This is why I developed the SHIFT framework, not just as a coaching tool, but as a way to have deeper, more meaningful conversations that lead, as I mentioned before, to this real change. And the best part is that you can use this in any situation. But please, before we dive into the steps of the SHIFT framework, I would love to hear from you. What's one conversation you've had that created a shift for you, a change? Share it in the comments below. I'm always interested in hearing from you, and I'm also fascinated by how intentional communication can make a real difference. So, what is the SHIFT model and how can you use it to create positive impact? I'm going to be breaking it down, but at the same time, I'm going to be sharing a story, and I call this the Latin American lady on the train. As I mentioned before, I'm from Venezuela, and this time I met this amazing lady on the train coming back home, and we had a conversation that was very intentional and that led to a shift. So what I'll do, I'll explain each one of the steps and I'll use the story as an example. Seek to understand. The first step in communication is to seek to understand. This is where you shift your focus away from yourself and towards the other person. This is about listening, not just hearing the words, but looking to understand what the person might need from you and how you can be of service. This is the spin. Listening deeply opens up space for connection, trust, and clarity. As I like to say, true understanding begins when you stop listening to respond and start listening to connect. It is really in that moment where you create the space for real change to take place. When you're truly listening, you are not just gathering information, you are creating a relationship where the other person feels heard and understood. And that's where meaningful conversations take place. At this point, I'm sure you're dying to know more about this conversation I had with the Latin American lady on the train. She sat next to me and she was wearing a baseball cap. And I asked, "Is that baseball cap from this country?" And she said, I don't remember which country exactly I said. And she said, "No, it is from Panama." "Oh, I'm from Venezuela." And then we started the conversation. It began as a quick chit chat that you can have with anyone, really. This one happened on the train. Linking it to seeking to understand, one thing I always like to do is that I'm present. And she asked me, "What is it that you do?" I explained. Then I asked her, "What is it that you do?" She explained. And at some point, while she was talking to me, she said, "Yes, but I'm not very happy with my job anymore." And that was my cue to delve a deeper. Next, we move to Harmonise. This step is all about creating rapport and gauging the connection between you and the other person. If the connection feels a bit off, which can happen, then the person may close up or avoid opening up completely. So harmonizing is about finding the balance where the person feels comfortable enough to express themselves. So imagine you're engaging with someone. I'll tell you more about the lady on the train, but you're engaging with someone in a conversation and you're noticing a bit of resistance. Well, instead of pushing, how about you ask for permission? Is it okay if I ask you a couple of curious questions? The worst that can happen is that the person says no, and that's okay. But then this simple approach helps ease the other person into the conversation without feeling overwhelmed. I see it as a dance. That's why I was moving a little bit like this. If you are too forceful, you can step on the other person's toes. But if you're in harmony, the conversation will flow. Now, the harmonized part in the conversation I had with the lady from Panama was something along these lines. Remember, she shared that she wasn't happy in her role, that she wasn't enjoying her job anymore. And by gauging that connection I had with her at that moment, I only asked, would you like to expand more? Or would you like to tell me more about that? That's all I did, which followed with this. Well, the thing is, Jose, that I want to apply for a job in sales, but I don't feel ready. Now, let's move on to the next part. Now, intervene. This is where you guide that conversation by asking more thoughtful, open-ended questions. And what kind of questions do I ask, Jose? You may wonder. Well, they will depend on the stage of the conversation. But here you have some examples. I like to explore possibilities. And here you can ask questions that focus on the future or potential outcomes. Some of my favorite go-to questions are, what would you like to get out of our conversation? Or what do you want? Or what do you want to achieve? These questions are also good conversation starters. I also like to uncover obstacles. And here you could ask about challenges or roadblocks they're facing. Questions you could ask, what's stopping you from achieving what you want? Here is another one. How have you overcome similar situations in the past? Because I personally don't like to dwell too much on the problem, and I'm always looking to get people to move from problem-based thinking towards solution-based thinking. And finally, I like to get people to reflect. And here I use questions that get them to think about what they've learned or what they could do differently. For instance, if you could change anything right now, what would that be? Or what's the most important takeaway from this conversation and what are you going to do with it? The goal here, as I said, is to guide, not to lead. You are helping the person discover their own answers rather than imposing your views. You are helping them move, as I said before, from problem-based thinking towards solution-based thinking. So, how did I go about the interviewing part in the conversation I had with the lady from Panama? Remember that she said that she wanted to apply for a job in sales, but she didn't feel ready. The question that came to mind, the open question that I used at that point was, well, what's actually stopping you right now? She expanded. I let her talk. I only listened. I sat back. And then along her answer, she mentioned that she had been doing a version of sales in her current job, in her current role, the one she didn't like. And I said, okay, in my mind, let me ask another question. And here is the second question I asked. What kind of knowledge and skills can you use from your current role in your new position, the one you would like to apply for? And there she continued to expand. So those were the two questions I asked at that point. So let's move on to the next step of the SHIFT framework now. Functioning check. Throughout the entire conversation, you're doing a function check. This isn't a one-time thing. It's happening continuously. You are constantly evaluating whether the conversation is moving toward the desired outcome. What do I mean by this? Is the person finding clarity? Are you somehow staying on track? Are you being of service? It's about making sure the conversation serves its purpose and keeps moving in the right direction, not for you, but for the other person. Important. I mentioned before that you're doing this functioning check all throughout the conversation. How is this working? Where is this going? Yes. At the same time, you are still seeking to understand throughout the process, okay? You're still listening. That's what will enable you to ask great questions. You are checking the connection, so you are harmonizing also. And along the process, you keep on asking open questions that hopefully will lead the person to something of value at the end, to a shift, to that change. The reason why I decided to break it down is just to make it easier to explain, but this is happening all at the same time. In terms of the functioning check, in the conversation I had with the lady from Panama, which by the way, it didn't go for any longer than 7 minutes. It was a short conversation. At the end, I let her talk, and she said to me after I asked the second question, she said to me, you know what? I'm ready to apply right now. So in my mind, the conversation is serving its purpose. So the functioning check is ticked, and then let's move on to the final step of the shift framework. Finally, take action. This is where you cement the shift, the change that has been building throughout the conversation. Within the context of meaningful conversations, think about it this way: a conversation without action is incomplete. At the end of your conversation, it's crucial to ask the other person what they are going to do next. Get them to commit to action steps, even if they're small. And the whole idea is for them to reinforce the change they have identified. While the shift can happen at any point in the conversation, this is where you lock it in, okay? This is where you make sure the conversation leads to tangible results. In my conversation with the lady from Panama, the take action had already happened when she said, I'm going to apply for that job. That's the action. That's the thing she found throughout the conversation. It didn't necessarily happen at the end. But in terms of locking that thing in, that change, that shift, that thing that she's going to be doing now, before she left the train, as she stood up, I asked her, what is it that you're going to be doing? Remind me. And she said to me, I'm going to be applying for that job. That is a perfect example of taking that action and locking in the conversation. The shift model is a framework that can help you have meaningful conversations that make a difference. Whether it's coaching, mentoring, a heart-to-heart, or just a conversation you have with someone on the train, these 5 steps: seek to understand, harmonize, intervene, function in check, and take action are strategies to create positive change in the lives of the people around you, the people you interact with. If you're interested in learning more about the shift model and any other powerful tool, you can find them in my book, Global Influence. You can also connect with me, drop me a message if you have any questions. The link for the book is in the description. And if you haven't already, if you're liking this channel, the content I'm creating, click the subscribe button to stay connected for more content on communication and creating impact. Finally, let's keep the conversation going. Share your thoughts in the comments and see you in the next video.